What's up, bikers? Welcome to episode 188 of the Biker Bar Podcast live stream. I haven't said it that way in a while. Anyways, today we're gonna have Salsa Cycles on. Have Joe from their team is gonna chat with us. I'm super excited to chat with them. It's been a while since I've had a bike company on, so this will be a fun conversation. Anyways, before we get started, another bike company that I've been talking about lately is Ari, which is recently just changed their name from Fazari to Ari. And as you know, they've been a sponsor of the channel and been riding the Delano Peak lately. If you're thinking about picking up a trail bike in that 150, 130 kind of suspension setup, I've been having a ton of fun with this thing. It's kind of crazy though, you know, after riding the 170 bike for so long, it's taken me a minute to get used to riding a trail bike. There's a lot of little small things that you notice, but this thing's been super fun. Honestly, the pink online doesn't look super appealing, but in person, I really like it. So I'm super stoked to all of you that helped pick the color for me. The pink was definitely the way to go. Thanks a lot. Outside of that, remember Tasco MTB or TascoStoke.com is the gear that I've been wearing. I love their Phantom line of gloves. It's getting hot. And actually the shorts too. The Phantom gloves and the Phantom shorts are my go-to every single time. I just can't get enough of them. Anyways, yeah, so check them out. Use code B1KER and save a little money. Outside of that, Cali Protectives has been a longtime supporter of the channel. You can see their if you're watching on YouTube, one of their Invader helmets is in my background all the time. That's like a XC full face, is the best way I can say it. So it's like where you would normally wear your half lid, but you're like, you know what, today I think I don't want my teeth to get knocked out. And it's super breathable. The chin bar still passes the motorcycle test. But they couldn't get the full DH rating because it has so much ventilation in it that apparently those are like too many holes for rocks to go through or something to that effect. One way or another, it's actually the helmet that I wear pretty much every time that I want to use a full face, but it is what it is. Anyways, you can check that out on their website, Cali Invader, and use code B1Cali30. Save 30%. So it's a pretty good discount over there. And outside of that, if you get a chance and you haven't been on my Instagram lately or Facebook, swing over there. Give me a follow. Those numbers, like watching those numbers grow, always helps me feel good. And when I'm talking to companies about trying to set up some coupon codes and deals for you guys, it helps. They're like, oh, you got a good reach. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started and we'll bring Joe on. How's it going, Joe?
Good. How are you doing, Robert?
Good. Dude, I'm living the dream, right?
Yeah. How's you're in SoCal, right?
Actually in Sacramento, so Northern California.
Okay.
Where are you at?
I am based in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, sweet. So you guys got all the elevation over there.
All 935 feet of it at my house.
Yeah. I had a guy on not too long ago that lives in that area, and he's a YouTuber, and he recently did a video in Sedona, and it was like something in the title was something about like, and I was humbled.
Humbled. You know, in Minnesota, we have awesome mountain biking. You know, we have in the metro, we have a ton of great riding. And then up on what we call the North Shore on Lake Superior, there's a ton of great riding up there. The Iron Range, some of the old iron mines have been turned into mountain biking zones, and those are pretty awesome. So
yeah, I watched one of that guy's videos on that area. It was pretty rad.
We have great access to mountain biking, and then of course gravel roads abound in the Midwest.
Yeah, I know how that was also what he was saying. There's a lot of gravel riding out there, but you guys have a pretty big fat bike scene there as well for the snow in the wintertime and stuff like that.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. You know, when the snow starts flying, the trails are groomed. And so we have a white ribbon and single track through the woods, and it's another awesome way to enjoy the winter.
Yeah. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and when it would snow, it was like not much riding, at least at that time. You know, there wasn't really much you could do until like people went out there hiking around or whatever, or somebody else went out there. So the whole fat bike thing, I'm sure, is like opened up a lot of time of the year that people can cycle that they used to not be able to.
Yeah, it totally changed. I mean, the upper Midwest, we've got specialized grooming equipment, snowmobiles, wide tired motorcycles pulling grooming equipment behind them. And those same areas, Marquette, the Keweenaw, Duluth, Minneapolis, Cuyuna, they're grooming trail. And so you see that same sort of mountain bike road tripping happening in the winter as you see in the summer when the trails are good. It's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, that's rad. So what do you do over there at Salsa?
My title at Salsa is category manager for bike and frame. And so what that means is I am responsible for our long range planning and execution of our entire bike line, both gravel road product as well as fat and mountain bikes as well.
How'd you get into that?
I have been with QBP. This is my 20th year. Be 20 years here in September, just a few short months. And I started out as an industrial designer. I have a fine arts degree in industrial design. Got out of college and realized that, hey, this is something, I was working in bike shops at the time, and I realized like, oh, I could get into bike design. There's not as many design jobs in the cycling industry as you might imagine. So it took me a little while to find a opportunity. In 2004, I was hired by QBP and started working on all the brands, Surly and Salsa being the two primary ones. And then I've been full-time on Salsa since 2015, focused on brand and product.
So what's the tie there? Because when somebody says QBP, I think of like that's where bike shops get their parts from, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so QBP is the largest distributor in the world for bicycle components. Started in the early 80s and started distributing hard to find parts. That would have been things at the time like just cables and chains and cassettes, things that we think are pretty easy to get access to now, weren't as easy access then. And then over the years grew to also include owned brands. Started Surly within the building. Salsa was purchased, and then we have the P&A brands as well, 45 North, Terravale, Problem Solvers, a host of other brands in the catalog.
So Surly was their brand that they started themselves?
Yep, QVP started Surly in the late 90s, and it was actually right around that same time that Salsa was purchased, and the brand started kind of growing from there.
That's interesting because both those brands, Salsa and Surly, both kind of have this like, in my mind, like this like cult following, where people are like when they get into those brands, they're like, this is what we ride,
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think causes that?
I think the brands have done a great job of standing out in the market. I think from my own perspective, coming into QBP in the early 2000s, we looked at QBP and just because it came from QBP, there was confidence in that product. If you had a product, any of the products behind you on the shelf, and it made it in the QBP catalog, it legitimized it in a lot of ways because QBP had it. And, I think that certainly has been a good bit of success for the brands. I think the other component of that is really within the business, the folks that are responsible for product and responsible for brand are encouraged to make the brands be distinctive. And so Surly, kind of this counterculture, punk rock inspired brand, grew up inside of this sort of really traditional distribution business, but it was encouraged for that to occur, and then looking for opportunities in the market that weren't initially met. And so if we think Surly, those of us that have been around the brand for several decades, we think about single speeding, and we think about each of their products was early on in category that hadn't yet fully developed. 29ers, even to a certain extent, cyclocross and gravel bikes. Fat Tire, obviously, Surly is most known for really kind of creating access to those products, and that's been huge for the brands. And then for Salsa's also had that opportunity. Some of it built on the stones that Surly laid. Others now more built on the brand's merit of itself, particularly to gravel product.
So where did Salsa get its beginning from?
Salsa was started in the late 80s in NorCal by a fellow named Ross Schaefer. Ross was right there with that Mount Tam crew and those early mountain bikers, and is also in the Hall of Fame alongside them.
Yeah.
And then started working with QBP in the mid 90s, as I understand it, and was looking to really grow the business. And that's when QBP purchased the brand and ultimately moved its operations to Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right on. That's interesting that he's in that whole like kind of clunkers group. I had Charlie Kelly on a long time ago on the show, and he was like the guy that like started the races up there, you know. And
Yeah.
it's probably one of my favorite podcasts that I've done out of the almost 200 episodes now. Like, I don't know, I like history, and it's just really fun talking to somebody that's like was there, you know, at the very beginning of how everything is started. So that's cool that brand also came out of there. There's a lot of like major players and
Yeah.
that came out of that group. It's kind of crazy to think about, you know, when they were there riding bikes, that they would be like the names that everybody would know later, you know.
Yeah, still continue on to this day.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of like imagine that today, you know what I mean? Like who would be doing that, you know? Maybe there's a bunch of one wheelers somewhere that are doing that.
Someone's out there inventing that next major sport, right?
Right. Are you guys seeing those one wheelers on your trails over there?
Definitely. Yeah, both the sort of skateboard looking style ones,
Yeah.
the straddling style, and
Yeah,
it's
I haven't seen as many of the straddling style. I definitely see a lot of the skateboardy looking ones, and it's like more and more. Like every ride, I feel like I go on, I see more, and I'm like, man, this is really catching on.
yeah. Maybe you all had a really rainy winter, and but here we're having a really rainy spring. And one of the more recent posts I heard is that some of the trail systems are actually using those to repair mountain bike wheel damage when
Oh
people
wow,
when they're wet. And so taking those in and kind of using them as a steamroller to flatten back out the trail. I was like,
that
hey,
makes sense.
there's a symbiotic relationship there.
Right? It'll be us and them against the equestrians,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. And with the advent of e-bikes, who are we to criticize a single wheel skateboard on our trails?
I honestly look at this stuff the same way, no matter what it is. That like, I feel like now we should eliminate any barrier to keep anybody from going outside.
Yeah.
You know,
Hands down.
there's so many things that are like, no, just stay here and fuck around with your phone, or like don't
Yeah.
stay on your couch. You know, there's like
Yeah.
any reason that we put in between. It's just like, what's the point? Like
Yeah.
it's really not like, even, and this is coming from a guy that likes to rip downhill, like even on trails that we have that are like only bike specific. Like, how often is it really a hiker like going up one of those trails where you would be like, oh man, this is such an awful thing, you know? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just like, my personality is like, let's just open trails and let people do whatever the hell they want to do with them, you know?
I think what it comes down to for me, and I've said this to a lot of folks, especially over the last several years, is ultimately what I'm looking to do in my role, and I think any of us is help people find their thing and find their people.
Mm-hmm.
We know that people who have people are happier, healthier, live longer, and much more productive. And if that's one wheel, if that's mountain biking, if that's e-biking, if that's frisbee golf,
Yeah.
whatever their thing is, help them find their thing, and hopefully it helps keep them, physically, emotionally, mentally healthy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. 100%.
helps make it a better world for all of us.
There's somebody in the comments asking some questions, and it really has nothing to do with what I'm about to ask, but
Yeah,
I feel like I came to a revelation that QBP stands for quality bike parts. Is that right?
that is, it's about as unique a name as Acme product.
Yeah.
But that is what quality bicycle products stand for. QBP.
Okay. Oh, so it's products, not parts. Okay.
Yeah.
I was close.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Anyways, so at Salsa, you're in charge of basically several different product lines there. How do you keep yourself kind of like in the know on mountain bikes and gravel bikes and the other disciplines that you're kind of leading the product line on?
Well, it's certainly not my effort alone. I mean, I think the in the know piece, we have just an awesome team that's engaged in sport. And so, whether it's design, engineering, or other product management team members, uh, everybody on the team rides, and they may be focused in one discipline or another. But it's that sort of collective of the entire team that comes together to help plot the vision forward. I just happen to be the one who's responsible for really kind of synthesizing that and presenting it
Yeah.
forward.
Herding all the cats.
Yeah, and they're awesome cats. But
Yeah.
so we've got team members. I think one of the cool things is since the pandemic, QBP has gone to a remote workforce, and so I have team members in Bellingham, in Tahoe area, in New Hampshire, in the southeast, and in the Pisgah area down there. So we have people kind of all over the country, and everyone's sharing a perspective on the disciplines that they're interested in or responsible for throughout the country, and it gives us a really, I think, pretty unique perspective, as well as great places to test product when the time comes. So that's
that's, I mean, you definitely see bike companies that are very specific to an area build bikes that are really good for that area, like Santa Cruz, for example. They build bikes that like really do well on the trails that we have here, but I don't know sometimes that they're always the best bike for some other areas.
Yeah, I think that's true. The PNW brands have a certain feel, the NorCal brands have a certain feel. It's like I don't know how to say the word, the terroir of the wine, so to speak, of the region. And for us, we're looking for a certain feel, but we are looking for products that really perform. It's hard to say everywhere, but perform on a variety of trails. Throughout the country and throughout the world, for that matter.
So you guys did a big push on e-bikes recently, didn't you?
We did, yeah. Salsa has launched 4 new e-bikes into the world this spring, 2 gravel bikes and 2 mountain bikes.
So 2 gravel bikes, what's the difference between them? Because I personally, like, I've just recently come to the place where I really understand e-bikes for mountain bikes. And then when somebody's like, oh yeah, an e-road bike or an e-gravel bike, I'm like, why? Like, it doesn't like, I'm like, you're not shoveling, like, so what's the difference?
Yeah, I think for us, the sort of rallying cry around all the e-bikes is really about the idea of more, right? Mm-hmm. We all love riding, and being able to do that more, whether that's miles, more days of the week, faster, whatever the case is, that's a really compelling story. Whether it be gravel or mountain, for that matter.
Yeah, I've heard of pretty compelling cases as well for like, hey, this is my dad that's 75 now, but he can still hang with us guys that are in our 40s if he's got, a little extra assist or something like that.
I think there's a component of that, sort of the equalizer component across the group. For me, as we've been working on them, one of the ways I've discovered it is they're awesome bikes for rest days, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't train super focused, but I do want to go out some days and go out and have a really hard, high intensity workout. And the day after that, it's great to hop on an e-bike and still get the same miles in, still ride the same speed, if not faster, but have a significantly less effort in doing so.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head right there. That for me was the one that like really changed my perspective on e-bikes. Because for me before, it would always be like, hey, I'd like to have an e-bike, but when am I going to use it? And in my mind, it would be like, well, instead of getting 5 guys together to do shuttle laps with pickup trucks, like we could just pedal, because I was out one day with a guy that was on his e-bike and he literally would get to the next trail at the same time as us by the time we were like done unloading all the bikes and stuff. And it was like really an eye opener. But outside of that, I was like, well, what am I doing it for? If like, I knew like some people would be like, hey, this makes me be able to ride in less time. And I'm not at a point in my life where my schedule is as restricted. I don't have young kids, and my kids are grown up, and so it's
Yeah.
like I don't have those reasons. But the rest day one is where it like really just unlocked it for me, where it's like, hey, I can go out and do a huge day on my bike, and where normally it would be like, okay, that next day I'm gonna go on some like chill 20-mile like gravel ride that has like not much elevation, and I'm just gonna like spin the legs. Where with the e-bike you could go out and still do another 3,000 4,000 feet of climbing
Yeah.
and be like, wow, this is like, I did some really fun downhill today, and it would have not been in the cards, you know?
Well, and that might be sessioning the same line. Maybe it's one of our local jump trails, for example. Instead of 2 repeats on it, I'm doing 4. And
Yeah.
those 4 repeats, I'm not as gassed because I didn't have to climb back up on the power. And so it's pretty wild. I think one of the other things too is the bikes are heavier, as we all know, and they're coming down in weight, but moving around a 45 to 55 pound bike under you versus a 30 to 35 pound bike uh, is very different. Builds strength, which is pretty cool. And when we're on an e-bike, typically, I don't know about you, but I'm moving through the woods a good 2.5 to 3 miles an hour faster.
Yeah.
And all that's conditioning. I kind of liken it to the F1 driver when they get on the highway. Traffic's moving a lot slower for them than it's moving for you and I at highway speeds.
Yeah.
We used to drive in F1 cars, and here we are going through the woods, 3 miles an hour, 25 to 30% of miles per hour faster.
Yeah.
Than we would be on a normal bike. And I think that translates to on-bike skills. And people can be as critical as they want, but I think we're just at the beginning of figuring out how these bikes are going to really kind of change our ride experience and enhance the entirety of it.
I can tell you hands down that it's definitely like grown the sport by a lot.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I like really question about it, at least recently I've been thinking about more, is okay, so you have a bunch of people that maybe fitness wise are getting into the sport, and they're being able to go out and do like 4 or 5 laps on some trail network that they would have typically been able to do 1 maybe or 2 because of their fitness level. And like, what does that do in terms of like our trails just really getting 4 years of use in 1 year instead of, so I feel like there really needs to be some kind of bigger push to really enroll people to trail advocacy, like work or donations or something, with the way that e-bikes are just going to, like, the trails are just going to get hammered, and it is just naturally going to happen because people are riding it more,
Yeah, absolutely. No, I tend to agree with you. I think, there's some studies I believe being done. I can't reference any specific, but I've listened to other podcasts where they're talking about, land managers understanding what's happening on the trails in areas of high concentration of use, and then how that's going to impact and how trail building needs to change, how maintenance needs to change, all those components of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You kind of dig into it. So you said 2 different gravel bikes. So what's the difference between the 2 different gravel? Is it like just carbon and aluminum, or is it like completely something?
Yeah, so we launched 2 bikes this year. So the more affordable of the gravel bikes, it's really meant to be approachable, both in terms of cost as well as ride as what we call our confluence, and that's based loosely on our Journeyer model, which is our non-motorized affordable gravel bike in the market. And Confluence is a hub drive bike. It's got a smaller 250 watt hour battery, less support, 40 newton meters of support. And really, when you look at it, it looks like a bike. Most folks don't recognize upon looking at it that it's an e-bike until they start getting into the details and seeing like, oh yeah, there is a bigger hub back there, or there is a control on the top tube or the handlebar. And that was really meant to be approachable, both in the sense of it looks like a bicycle, it doesn't stand out as an e-bike, as well as, of course, it's a bit more affordable as a result. And so we're able to offer e-bike from $2,500 to $3,500 US in both flat and drop bar options for folks, and becomes an awesome bike for getting out on gravel roads. And frankly, if it's capable of gravel roads, riding around town in the city.
Yeah, it's a good commuter and
using it for those other applications. Yeah. And so that's our Confluence, fully capable as a gravel bike, but capable of so much more.
Mm-hmm.
And then we launched a bike called the Tributary. And if you've been around the brand, and you can see it hanging behind me, is our Cutthroat frame. Cutthroat is what our Tributary is based loosely on. And Cutthroat was a bike that was designed for the Tour Divide specifically. It's going on right now, down the Continental Divide and on the Great Divide mountain bike route. And the Tributary was designed really to be our expression of what a gravel e-bike can and should be. One of our, as we're talking about how we've experienced e-bikes, one of the things that we recognize in Salsa, and as we started testing, was we have the support. Why not have more capability? And so Tributary is a wide handlebar, drop bar, capable of handling up to a 29 by 2.5 tire gravel bike with a Bosch speed motor, supports up to 20 miles per hour, and then handles batteries up to 625 watt hours. So you have, with a range extender, close to 100 miles of range, depending on mode that you use. So you have huge range and tremendous amount of capability. That bike, upon first look, someone might just consider it to be a drop bar 29er. And that's in some ways exactly what it is. But from our position, why not have a suspension fork, a dropper post, big tires, because we got the motor to support that, and we're pushing speeds upwards of 25 to 28 miles an hour pretty consistently on the bike. So just a ton of capability.
So this is, for those of you watching, I put the Tributary up on the screen. The fork is really raked out. I'm really surprised to see the angle on it.
Yeah, the bike is, I'll say, super progressive. We oftentimes with mountain bikes, we hear long, low, and slack, but when it comes to the Tributary, that same idea applies.
Mm-hmm.
We got to that through putting drop bars and hop up motor on our hardtail model, the Timberjack, actually. And then we do a lot of testing with angle sets. And so the team was riding our hardtail mountain bike with drop bars and a Bafang motor bolted onto it. And they come back from testing that. We affectionately called it the Timber Fang prototype. And they come back from testing that and they say, we're really liking head angles down in the mid to high 60s for this bike, and steeper seat angles. And it really offers a tremendous amount of confidence at these higher speeds. And there's this sort of trepidation to take a bike as slack as our Tributary is. But really there was encouragement from myself and several others in the team, like, if you like it and you're confident in it, do it. What's the risk?
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. It's definitely, like, when I first pulled it up, it definitely, like, immediately I was like, oh wow, that's different,
Yeah. So I think you'll see head angles on there reaching sort of progressive XC full suspension angles in the 67 to 68 range, depending on fork that's offered on the model. And then,
so this other Tributary you have that has a front suspension on it. Are you guys seeing a lot of gravel people kind of getting into that realm where they want suspension?
We're seeing more and more suspension. So we base this around 120 millimeter suspension fork. And we're seeing more and more people want that. And again, here, we're moving at faster speeds. And, it's kind of like, if you were to buy a motorcycle, you probably wouldn't buy a rigid motorcycle.
Right.
And that offers both comfort, but also offers, more importantly, control and traction on the front of the bike. And so, that the dropper and then the wide handlebars, somewhere in the range of 50 to 52 with handlebars on the bike, give you a really confidence inspiring fit on the bike. I've never seen someone come back from a ride on it without a giant smile on their face, and they're almost always in the drops with the dropper down, just smiling and laughing and having a good time.
Right on, man. That's It's interesting to see. I've definitely seen a lot more gravel bikes on single track that I wouldn't have seen, like, let's just say 5 to 10 years ago. I think the
Yeah.
geometries have changed enough, and I don't know if it's just like, I don't know if like the gnarlier trails have gotten gnarlier. So like guys that like, they're like, yeah, I use my 170 bike on that, but whenever I want to ride these XC trails, I need to step it up, and the hardtail's not good enough anymore. So now I'm gonna do it on a gravel bike.
Challenging
You know?
ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lines are blurred, aren't they?
Yeah, it's interesting to see it like change, and I mean, ultimately, I feel like the current gravel bike, it's like very similar to the mountain bikes I was riding in the 90s, as far as tire size, and we didn't have any suspension. So
No, it's kind of the joke, right? Like, what is a current gravel bike? A mid '90s mountain bike, and
right, exactly.
in some
Yeah.
ways, yes, but in some ways, they're way more capable than those mid '90s mountain bikes that we were on.
Yeah, I would say definitely are. I mean, just brakes alone is like, oh my God. I remember the first time I ever used a hydraulic brake, and my mind was just like,
Yeah,
like, what?
yeah,
Like, I pulled this and the wheel just stopped. It
yeah.
just stopped.
And traction immediately.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
I
So you
think
did, go
I
ahead.
think well, I was say I think what's super cool about gravel bikes is that it has blurred the line. Before we had road bikes and mountain bikes, and now we have these gravel bikes, and we have the ability to maybe do a route that allows us to use some cut through trail, whether that be
Yeah,
single track, double track, or otherwise, and we're less bound.
yeah,
I don't think we were necessarily bound previously, but mentally and emotionally, we're less bound and
yeah,
rather encouraged to take that cut through. And that, frankly, that's the same thing about fat bikes. Is
yeah,
here we built these bikes that encourage people to imagine just heinous routes by any standard,
yeah,
to go ride their bike down. And
yeah.
I think that's what our brand is all about, is encouraging people to explore those just super challenging routes. And
I I honestly think if you're not like fully committed to, like, I'm gonna ride road races and I'm gonna try to win, and or like rank or something like that. Like, I think if you're a person that's thinking about doing, like, I'm just air quote, like, road riding, like, you should 100% buy a gravel bike, because to me it's so close that I feel like it just gives you so much more opportunity. And unless you're, in my mind, like really competitively trying to like make sure that you can go as fast as you can possibly go, or whatever the benefits are, without
yeah,
me like going down the rabbit hole. Like, for the most people though, I would say like 85% of people out there, a
yeah,
gravel bike can be the perfect bike.
yeah. I love a fast, purpose built road bike. To be clear with this next statement, but the equivalent would be the automotive world selling us F1 race cars to commute to work in.
Yeah,
Wildly impractical. And for decades, that's what cyclists were sold. These bicycles that were ultimately built for the fittest athletes in the world. And now, with particularly with gravel bikes, we have just this encouragement to go out and do challenging routes, ride roads which are less traveled by cars, and the bikes are far more comfortable and capable. And it's
yeah.
incredible to see.
I think you see a lot of the, like, what this is like the down country of road is like the all road kind of
Yeah,
geometry. And I think that's where, like, yes, some gravel bikes that maybe are more aggressively built with their geometry for being able to handle single track and features and tech, those maybe aren't as good, but you really have this like kind of all road geometry that falls into a lot of gravel bikes. And that's the spot where I really feel like it just shines, it really shines. Like, when I had more of a road geometry, so it would have been like a cross bike,
yeah, yeah,
and I could ride that with slicks on it, and my times on a gravel bike with knobby tires pretty much the same.
yeah,
So it's not like, it wasn't like I changed bikes and like, man, I'm a minute slower now. It's like, nah, it's pretty much the same. Like,
when I look at all the other things we're learning about, aerodynamics or tire size, tire pressure. The old idea was that the narrowest tire with the highest pressure was fastest, and now we're learning that no, in fact, a bigger tire at lower pressure is faster.
Which is like really like for anybody that's been around long enough to like be in the older mindset, you're like, what?
Yeah. Well, I thought.
Yeah.
To an extent, it's true on mountain bikes. We were trying to build mountain bikes that were as light as they could possibly be. They weren't particularly durable. And now we're settling into like every mountain biking weighing 32 to 35 pounds.
Yeah.
Because
which is great until you try to fly with one.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's like a rabbit hole I would love to bitch about every day is my experience of trying to get my bike bag under 50 pounds so I don't have to pay an extra $100.
Yep. have lived that on test trips.
It's so mind-boggling because like one airport can be like, 65 pounds. We don't even care. And the next airport's like 51.2. You're paying
the
extra.
Same airline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like 0 cents. So anyways, so you brought out a couple of mountain bikes as well. So what do you got in that?
We did. Yeah. So we brought out 2 new mountain bikes, as you and your audience may be aware, we're seeing this divergence in the mountain bike space. We're seeing, full power bikes is kind of how we've understood e-bikes up until recently. And then we're seeing the emergence of the light EMTB as well. And so we brought out our full power enduro bike, the Notch. That's got 160 millimeters of rear travel and 170 millimeters of front travel. There it is on the screen. Yeah. So Notch is a Bosch equipped e-bike. Like I said, 160 rear, 170 front. The cool thing about Notch, and this really is across Salsa's mountain bike line, is we design all of our bikes to be adjustable in travel. And so with a change of a rear shock and an air shaft in the fork, this bike can become a 180 millimeter rear travel and 190 millimeter front travel bike.
Oh, wow. Like really big.
So the Notch would be fully capable of running your favorite downhill fork and shuttling downhill trail on if that's what you would like to do. So, but then for, kind of the center of where the EMTB world is today, that 160, 170 is kind of that sweet spot. Performs on a lot of different trails. This bike's super progressive. I think, more so than the slack head angle, you can see the steep seat angle.
That seems to be the way that a lot of companies are going now, though. It's like makes it pedal better.
It makes it pedal better, and I think with with the e-bike specifically, putting out as much power as a motor does, we can climb steeper stuff. And so this bike has a 79.9 degree seat angle, or 80 degree seat angle, and the seating position is just super planted for climbing. And then, of course, descending, yes, it's got a longer wheelbase and a long front center, but that saddle's out of the way. So we have tons of room on top of the bike to move around and descend on it. And then the longer wheelbase offers just a ton of stability without making it too heavy.
Yeah. How do you guys decide what motor you're going to use? Is it like
it's a process?
Yeah. Because I mean, as a consumer, to me, guys that are into e-bikes, like right after they tell you what e-bike they have, they tell you like what motor it is, And as a guy that doesn't like really ride e-bikes, I'm like, what does it matter?
What's this one or what's that one?
Yeah, some people are like, dude, you got to get the Shimano or the Bosch or whatever. And so, like, how do you guys decide? Is it just like what tuning characteristics, or is it like?
Yeah, so for us in the front end, we're looking around to our partners first and foremost, and being within QBP, we're looking to brands that QBP distributes and are partnered with. And one of the things that kind of came out of the testing was what were the characteristics we liked of these motors, but then what's the shape of the regulatory requirements around these bikes? We got all the news around batteries, and testing and UL certification, new emerging standards there, as well as the performance characteristics. And then there's the aftermarket support. Do you have a product that is something that can be serviced? Service parts are readily available.
Mhm.
And happy to say that there's increasingly mainstream brands that make drive systems that are really well serviced. And for this bike, it came down to the Bosch performance. It came down to the support for QBP, and it became down to the all around partnership with Bosch as a brand and how they work with partners.
Mhm.
It doesn't hurt that Bosch has perhaps the best reputation globally for e-bike systems,
Mhm.
and they continue to drive the category forward. So it's a wide-reaching decision, and once you're on that motor, you're on it for a generation of product. It's not like you change the motor the next season, like you might change
Right.
a drivetrain or brakes or something like that. It's a part of the vehicle now.
How much like software updates do they put out to like actually change the performance over time, or is it like pretty much after it ships, that's the way it's going to stay?
Yeah, they continue to make updates to firmware uh, on the products, and those are actually pushed via the Bosch Flow app.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you've ever used Shimano Di2 or SRAM Axis, e-bike systems are very similar in that you download the app and then it gives you access to tunability, it gives you access to support, and it gives you access to pushes from them for updates. And so
Mm-hmm.
we do determine some of the base characteristics of that, but a lot of times those are based on their pre-tuned characteristics, and then they'll push updates through the system as is necessary. And then you open up your app, you get a notification, connect to your bike, and just like a lot
Yeah.
of places, you have that over air tunability. One of the cool things about Bosch is you can change some of the support modes. But I think one of the other cool things there is you can always hit the reset button if you get
Yeah.
to that too.
Yeah. Get you back to where he started, right?
Yeah, because it is really easy to get lost in the tuning of the bikes as a rider as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's one of those things where you don't realize what you're adjusting actually has like other effects to things, like pedal
Absolutely.
bob or or whatever, brake kick or something. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
like all these like different things that you don't realize. I know when I was, let's say when like 27.5 was starting to come out, I remember like, oh, you could change this bike that's a 26 bike to a 27.5, and
Yeah.
then like all you need to do is like get this other stem, and then you can do this and all this new thing. You put all these like new parts on your bike that are on the newer bikes, but it doesn't make it ride like the newer bike. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, there's still limitations within it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then whenever you start to realize things like I guess kind of on that same path, it's now where they have these bikes with like flip chips in them and stuff. And it's like, man, I really can feel the difference between that like bolt position being 5 millimeters different than it was before. No wonder back when I tried to put all those new parts on this old bike, it felt like shit after I was done.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and whether it's hardware change like you're talking about, flip chip, or you mentioned suspension tuning, in this case motor tuning. One of the things we profess, and we do this internally with our own testing, is one variable at a time.
Yeah.
Change one variable at a time, change it back, bracket your testing, change something all the way to one side, change it to the other, and then creep back towards the middle and find your sweet spot. And that same thing applies. There's far better videos that I'm explaining right now on bracketing testing and suspension, or in this case, all the variability that's in a drive system. And I think the biggest piece is kind of demystifying it and encouraging that type of exploration, like you're describing, and then letting people know, like, hey, there is a reset button if you get lost.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm assuming then the other mountain e-bike that you brought out was maybe is a smaller motor, or is it just a smaller suspension platform?
No, that's correct. Yeah, we brought out a bike called the Moraine. So that is our light EMTB. That is based around the Fazua Ride 60 motor that's launched this year. And you asked on the notch how we go about it. One of the things we really liked about the Fazua motor, in addition to its pedaling characteristics and how it provides power, was its packaging on the bike. And so the Moraine is a 145 rear travel, 160 front travel trail bike. And this is really meant to be that nimble, playful poppy, you on your best day, light EMTB everyday experience. And so cool thing about the Moraine is, with that packaging of that Fazua motor, the back end of this bike stays at 435 chain stays, which is about as short as you'd find in any non-motorized bike in this travel class. And we're actually able to use a lot of the same equipment that we would use on a non-motorized bike to keep it light in this space.
It's a totally different suspension platform too, though.
Still leveraging split pivot, and that's the concentric pivot at the rear axle of the bike, but leveraging a couple different layouts. And the Moraine layout gives us this horizontal shock, keeps all the linkages small and nimble and pretty compact on the bike, gives us room for a water bottle or range extender. And then you can see that tube strap location on that cross brace that connects the top tube and down tube and creates a shock mount on the bike. And so really nice compact layout. On the notch, the vertical oriented layout, we can still achieve a lot of the same suspension characteristics we're looking for out of the bike. The packaging is as simple as getting the shock packaged in the bike for the travel class we want. And the vertical layout here allowed us to use that longest body shock and still create standover we wanted, fit water bottles, fit battery in there, as well as you can see the mounts kind of peeking under the top tube there where you get a tube or your tool roll.
Can you swap batteries on both of these bikes?
The batteries are removable by removing the motor.
So it's complicated. It's not like side of the trail kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not a side of the trail or a trailhead scenario. It is very much a remove the motor and drop the battery. We've done so much testing. I've got it down now to about 10 minutes. I think the notch I counted one time, it was 11 or 12 bolts to drop the motor and slide the battery out and put a new one in. We see that happening, of course, like in the Enduro World Series e-bike races, but there's a pit crew involved in that situation, but probably not something that you're going to be doing on a road trip. And
but you said you do have a range extender, though.
You do have a range extender on the bike, and with a 625 battery on the notch, we've been able to get somewhere in the range of 40 miles out of that. With the range extender, I would expect that bumps up to the 50 to 60 mile range, depending on mode, and then and elevation, of course. And then we've been getting pretty consistently between 30 and 40 miles out of the Moraine, depending on elevation. And then there'll be a future range extender coming from Fazua as well. It's been teased a lot. It's yet into the world.
Yeah. I've ridden the Fazua motor on several different bikes, and then a couple of the full power ones, and I think I really like the idea of the Fazua, and I like the bike being lighter and feeling more nimble. But I think personally, overall, if I'm gonna ride an e-bike, I'd rather just have the full power one. That's just gives you, it doesn't like limit you at all. I feel like the Fazua is like in my mind, I want to like the Fazua more, but like in reality, I like the full power one better, just because the more power. Honestly, even the weight, it's like, oh, I'm riding an e-bike, like this thing's super planted. And instead, when the Fazua, you're kind of like in this well, it's sort of both,
Yeah, I think at the top of the hour or top of the call here, you're talking about coming off of longer travel bikes, kind of that enduro class of bikes, and what I have found consistently is riders that are coming more from the enduro trail space into the e-bike space. They're like, give me the full power,
Yeah.
give me all the capability. Riders that are coming from like maybe an XC background and maybe even a race XC background are
Yeah.
like, I want the light bike because I still want to
Yeah.
work my ride.
Yeah.
And it's not really necessarily something we see geographically either. It's really has to do with more of the rider persona.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see how that continues to evolve as the stigma around e-bikes falls. I think there's a portion of
Yeah.
people who really like the light e-bike because no one knew they were on an e-bike.
Right.
And then there's those of us who are, myself included in this, maybe like kind of pushing boundaries a little bit and are like, yeah, my e-bike, what's your deal?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think out here too, where I live, we have such huge, massive climbs where
yeah,
if you're on a like a Fazua type bike and your other buddies are on a full power bike,
yep,
you're like putting serious work in just to keep up with them
yeah,
on like they're on trail or eco, and you're just like, dude, I'm like hammering right now.
yeah.
And this is not the e-bike ride that I thought I was going on, you know?
That's exactly the case. And I mean, it sort of translates over from the non-motorized space, right? Like, I don't know, maybe you have friends that you ride with and in the non-motorized space, I have friends that are like, what are we riding today? Are we riding trail bikes or are we riding XC bikes?
Yeah.
I don't want to show up on an XC bike if you're on a trail bike and vice versa.
Yeah.
And in this instance, it's even more pronounced where, yeah, there's no keeping up with a full power bike on a light bike. But if you're in a pack of riders on light bikes, then you're pretty well matched.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that because like I have a good buddy that we ride together a lot, and it's like, are we bringing enduro bikes for this? Because
Yep.
I'm not going to suffer up this climb to like have the good downhill if you're going to be like a fucking like way far in front of me
Yeah.
because you're on your trail bike, just smashing.
Or what descents are we riding? Because I'm not going to bring my short travel bike. If we're
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I can do it, but it's going to be hairy on that thing,
And I think that same thing is true in the gravel space as well. For those bikes, Tributary is so wildly capable. It's like, are we going to be riding smooth gravel roads, or are we going to be taking some B roads and mountain 2-track and that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
What are we doing with it? So,
man, the one thing that I always like, I'm gonna get sidetracked by that whole gravel comment that you just made, but like,
intended.
I don't ride in the drops very much, like, but I feel like that's where you want to be if you're like going through technical stuff on a gravel bike. So it just feels like it's hard for me to wrap my head around like riding technical features in the drops as well. Like,
Yeah,
I'm like, why can't we just change the brakes to be like up at the top somehow?
I'd say yes, and like one, wide handlebars have changed that. Going from say 44s, 46s at the widest to 50s, 52s.
Yeah,
Been pretty awesome. The other thing on the Tributary too, and this is something that we've done on the Cutthroat, something we've done on the Fargo, is really a taller stack on the front end of the bike and setting up the bars in a more neutral position where the preference is not necessarily only to the tops and the drops are this real tucked position,
yeah,
but the drops become kind of the neutral primary.
yeah. And maybe I just haven't ridden a bike like that. For me, I'm like 90%, 95% of the time I'm in the hoods, like, yeah.
Yep, it's changed. And then, I mean, droppers on gravel bikes as well have changed it where, okay, now we can get our center of gravity lower. We're not trying to deal with,
Yeah.
Where's that saddle in relationship to my body and can I comfortably fit in the drops? Like, nope, I can bend the knees. I can get the saddles out of the way. All those same characteristics.
I got a dropper on my current gravel bike, and I'm one of those guys that's like trying to put the longest possible dropper on my mountain bike, So I'm like, oh, I got a 210, but I could order a 240 and shim it down to 220. At least it's another 10 millimeters,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I got the dropper on my gravel bike, and the first time I used it, I was like, huh, that didn't go very far because it's like 125 millimeters. I'm like, what are these guys doing? They don't even have a clue yet.
Yeah. There's some short travel, like 40, 50 millimeter droppers out there for gravel. And I mean, I think they're cute, but
Right.
they're not particularly functional.
Yeah.
And I'm the kind of rider who I literally have a dropper on my road bike, and I use it for some of our descents here, where we have
Yeah.
these river bluff descents down these S bending roads, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Low center of gravity is awesome. So
Yeah, I was one of those guys that was like a late adopter of the dropper as well. I was like, I've been riding since the 90s.
yeah,
I don't need a damn dropper. And then once I finally used one, it was like changed my mind. And now I'm at this point where
yeah,
I just did a hardtail review, and normal, like the last time I did one of those, I rode it like bare stock, with no dropper. And I was like, look, I'm not even riding this without a dropper, because
absolutely.
I can tell you right now, I'm going to hate it. And it's going to ruin my perception on everything else of this bike.
You can help settle a long-standing debate. Maybe we can have a poll in the comments of the podcast here. But would you choose dropper over suspension?
Probably, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. Because it's so like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if we're thinking like, hey, I could have a hardtail or with a dropper, or a full suspension with no dropper, I would definitely take the hardtail with the dropper, like hands down. Like I
Yeah.
wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah. And that's the case, for us as well. And that's why I run one on my road bike. But when we finally had a dropper that could withstand a cold winter without failing, it was pretty amazing on the fat tire bike as well. And so, yeah, we make provisions for them everywhere that we can.
It blows my mind on some trails, like how much I'm using it. Especially like you ride a place like Sedona, for example, where it's just like punchy up, punchy down, punchy up, punchy down, and like repetitively, and you're literally for 15 seconds have it raised, and for 15 seconds have it lowered, and you think to yourself, like, how the hell did I ride this stuff without it? Like,
well, and for many decades, right, we had shifters there, and we didn't use shifters anywhere nearly as much as we use droppers.
Yeah.
And so now we're exercising that back and forth.
Yeah. It's very interesting. So did you guys bring out anything new in the just regular old analog mountain bike space?
We got a lot of work underway for 25. Not quite ready to talk about it yet, but
yeah.
You'll start to see some of that in the second half of 24, for we've got an even bigger launch here coming in 25 for Salsa.
So what's your lineup look like in the mountain, like the analog space? You kind of have like XC, trail.
Yeah, we got a full suite of product there. So our Spearfish is our XC marathon mountain bike, 120 millimeters of rear travel, front and rear, and then we have our Horse Thief. Our Blackthorn is our trail bike, and then our Cassidy is our enduro bike. And so, we're working on a lot of new product in this space, and of course, there's a lot of great opportunities in the market right now for these products at retail.
Mm-hmm.
And then
with your hardtail, you have the rangefinder here, and I really find it amazing that some of the builds that companies are putting out in this, like this one, for example, at that $900 range. And it looks like, and I'm just looking at the profile of the frame, like it has a pretty good, like, playful geometry too.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I mean, rangefinder is our most affordable, most accessible hardtail. And, again, there does come a point in mountain bike geometry where maybe on an enduro bike, it becomes a lot for a rider to handle. But we're riding such capable geometry today that we wanted to make sure that was available to these riders. We didn't oversimplify it, but we also didn't push it so far that it becomes a bear to handle for the rider. So still pretty progressive head angles and seat angles on these bikes, and bike that really can kind of grow with that rider as they advance to an extent, right? Some riders, this will be their mountain bike for decades, and other riders, hopefully they get into this product and then advance and progress through our brand, and they had a good experience on it.
I think there's a lot to be said for a hardtail, and whether or not you're buying one as your first bike or you're buying one later as your like
Yeah.
your additional your N+1, you know, like I bought a hardtail a few years back because I just wanted to make my local trails like fun again. Make your local trails great again, you know, and like you know, after you've ridden a trail, you know, 200 and some times in the daytime, and you've ridden it at night, and it's like, you know, everything, you can change the bike, and then all of a sudden it's a totally different ride. And,
Yeah.
I have since from then, you know, I got to a point where I was like, now I'm just trying to take this thing on the gnarliest shit I can because I can, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
and but I think now I've kind of like got to a spot with my hardtail where it's like I want to go on an XC ride with it that's going to be like have a little bit of jank in it here and there, but I just like love the way that it feels of just laying down the power and feeling it just transfer like all the way to the trail.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I saw you guys. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I think that product, you know, for you, kind of the mountain biker's hardtail
Yeah.
in the trail space, our Timberjack, and that
Yeah.
was capable of handling up to a 150 fork.
Oh, wow. Right on.
Much more progressive in its angles. Has a adjustable rear center with our alternator dropout, so you can run single speed or geared. It's just super versatile bike. I have that
Yeah.
bike. I use it on the local jump line
Yeah.
at the park, and you know, I use it in the spring when it's muddy and I don't really feel like cleaning a bike that much.
Yeah.
So it's a really great versatile bike.
I think that's the spot that I would say that most mountain bike companies should have a hardtail that's built like that. I think you hit a lot of different things there, like the sliding drop or the dropout so that you could do a single speed. I think a lot of people are buying a hardtail for that, and to have people go out and buy like third party kind of things to make that happen, I feel like why not design that in there? You know what I mean? And it sounds like you guys did, which is really rad. I'm interested though that you have a 27.5 plus option. And I personally love 27.5 plus on a hardtail. I think I could go on and on about how great it is, but I'm really questioning, does the lack of tire selection tell me that it's going to die?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question. You know, I think certainly here the market conditions after the pandemic have kind of challenged that.
Yeah.
But I would also encourage that you know, this is 27.5 plus, but 29 plus has been around for a while. We've had 29 plus bikes in the past in Salsa's line, and you know, we still see some tire options out there. It's not it's dwindled, but it's not down to one option or
Yeah.
one, you know, one tire you can get for a unicycle somewhere or something like
Right.
that. It's stuck around enough that brands are supporting it.
Yeah.
And 27.5 plus has more reach than 29 plus because it becomes quite a bit more accessible.
Yeah.
And what we found is it's really confidence inspiring for riders
Yeah.
because it's so stable, it's so comfortable, and it's a little less finicky in terms of tire pressures. You know, tire pressure is a bit lower. You don't have to be so on it with your tire pressure, and so they become pretty versatile. By no means is it the majority of our sales, but it's a viable option for a lot of riders, and we still see it in the market.
So would you rather a 29er 2.6 or a 27.5 2.8?
I am, you know, 6'2".
Uh-huh.
I have been a 29-inch rider since, you know, 2003.
Uh-huh.
And I've played around with 27.5 plus. I really enjoyed it, but I do like a little bit smaller tire for the precision it offers, and
Uh-huh.
a little less wallow underneath me. But I spent a lot of time, you know, obviously on fat tires,
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of different gravel sizes, on 27.5 plus, on 26 plus, on 29 plus.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, each of them has their place.
Yeah, I've been really contemplating that in my head lately. I've ridden the 27.5 plus like 2.8 is kind of what I've ridden for a long time. And
Yeah.
anytime I've had a bike that can switch, plus or 29, whenever I ran 29, I would always run like normal size 29. And
Yeah.
I've never actually tried that. Like a 2.6 is kind of what I was thinking about trying here on a in the near future. And I was like, man, am I gonna like it more or not? I
Yeah.
really like the 2.8 because you can get that low profile like tread pattern,
Yeah.
but because you have that extra like ground, you're touching more of the ground, you can get away with it and not like lose grip.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't
It's
have a
interesting.
ton of weight. I kind of look at it like the mullet, the 27.5 rear wheel debate. Like, is it good everywhere? No, but there's definitely some places where when
Yeah,
you're into a steep line, having that tire just enough clearance to you and your ass is pretty
yeah,
fun. And
yeah.
there's
It's funny you say that.
certain tracks where that maneuverability is going to be really valuable as well.
Yeah, my personal experience there is 100%. The 29er is definitely faster, but the mullet is definitely more fun.
Yeah. Yep.
You
Yeah.
know, yeah. I have my 170 bike set up mullet, and I broke a rear wheel, and I was waiting for it to come back, so I put some 29ers on it, and it was like the next day I was getting PRs. So I
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, these 29ers are definitely faster. And then, however long it took the wheel to get fixed, and it came back, and then the first ride back on the mullet, I was like, oh yeah. It just feels so sweet, like through the turns, and
Yep.
you're like, this just feels good. I don't even care I'm going slower. I
Yeah.
feel faster.
With no change in rear center or anything, it's playful and fun.
Yeah.
I think that's what
Yeah.
it comes down to with all this is like we have so many options and there's no right one. It
Yeah.
really depends on your experience and what you're after.
Yeah. And I think for us that have been riding for a long time and that have opinions or can understand that, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But then for a new rider, oh my God, like I don't even know what do you guys do to help people get into the right bike?
Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing is offer choice, right? For riders. And so for a bike like Rangefinder, we offer both. We encourage folks to ride both if they can get access to them. And fortunately, they can. We have a pretty strong dealer network. And I worked retail when I was in college, and I would always say to riders, buy the bike that makes you feel the most confident, that brings the biggest smile to your face, because that's the one you're going to ride the most. And
Mm-hmm.
and rather than sort of push someone into a certain space. And I think that's probably different, maybe from certainly when I got into mountain biking, maybe when you got into cycling, where it's like, well, you had to get an XC race bike, you had to get clipless pedals, you had to get all this stuff. And in the end, a good bit of that probably didn't serve us the way it could have or should have, or today we have option to be served.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's very, very very interesting in that aspect. That's something else there for sure. What do you guys have like dirt jumpers and everything, or is it
No,
just
yeah, no, we don't have a dirt jump product. Salsa's focus is adventure, and
Mhm.
um, each of the products we build is meant to be versatile. So we talked about Timberjack, for example, this really versatile trail hardtail, but it's also got a host of mounts so that you can put bags on it and go out and go on a bike packing trip
Mhm.
fully loaded, or do a big route fully loaded. And that's kind of the case across our products, um, if you will. But doesn't mean the team doesn't ride some of that stuff. It's just we don't make
Yeah,
it for it today.
yeah, yeah, totally. I think that I mean, I don't think that every bike company needs to have like one of everything. You know what I mean? I think obviously, like, look at what Trek said not too long ago. Like, we got too many, you know?
Well, we all have too many today, right? Too many units, and really trying to focus our lines. And uh, for Salsa, with the expansion into E, that's quite a bit of expansion with 4 new models. So we're keeping the line pretty tight.
Yeah, I mean, even on your mountain bike line, I mean, like what I'm looking at on the site is it's 6 different models.
Yeah.
That's I would imagine there's some decent overlap there.
There's a lot of overlap, but I would say one of the ways in which we've managed that is really, we talked about some of the versatility in the mountain product and being able to do multiple travel classes. And I think a good example of that is Blackthorn Cassidy, where if you look at those two bikes, they're the same silhouette because of the same frame. And
Mm-hmm.
we're using different shocks, different forks, and a different shock link to be able to change travel class. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty cool to have riders come up to me at Sea Otter and say, I bought a Blackthorn, but I also bought the linkage kit to change it into Cassidy. And I change it into Cassidy when I go to the bike park or when I go on this big trip. And so they have this sort of 2-in-1 story. Is it going to be what everyone does? No, but
Yeah.
it is there for those of us who really like to tinker and play. And
Yeah.
Blackthorn's been my trail bike for the last 3 or 4 years, and I've been riding it in a 130, 140 configuration that we don't have
Mm-hmm.
because I can change the stroke of the shock, change the rear travel, put a 34 on it, and it's an awesome short travel trail bike for our trails here in Minnesota. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's that versatility is a way in which we can offer as wide a line we can, and hopefully in the end offer some versatility to the rider as well. And
I think that's key, man. I think honestly, bikes are expensive, and even, I mean, you guys have some great budget offerings as far as like where your bikes are starting at, like $2,600 compared to some other brands out there that are like almost $5,000 for their bottom of the line bike. And
yeah,
that's a lot, especially for somebody that's just getting into it. Or like on the other hand, like having that ability to be really versatile like that, like that makes it so that somebody that, okay, spending $3,000 or $4,000 is already more than what they want to spend. But like then they're like, well, I actually can have a short travel bike and a long travel bike all in this one. I think that's awesome.
yeah. Well, with all the places where we play as a brand, whether that's gravel, fat tire, or mountain. I mean, think about the front of this. We were talking about mountain biking. Well, mountain biking was really only popularized in the 90s. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
very old sport, and we're still tinkering. And gravel's even younger in the modern era, and we're very much still tinkering in gravel. And fat tire is similar, and it doesn't really, I think, necessarily matter the sport you're into. I grew up in the automotive world, working on cars, and what does a hot rodder do? They're constantly tinkering. It's probably more about the tinkering than it is the finished product.
Right.
I think as cyclists, we're the same way, right? It's that new handlebar, those new pedals, the new saddle, the new dropper. Uh, shoot, maybe it's even frame protection for that matter. Uh,
Yeah.
and so we provide these super versatile platforms that allow riders to ultimately kind of play with, almost like a Lego set or something of that nature. Uh,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to somebody yesterday and they were like, man, I really want this kind of bike and I really want this kind of bike. And I had said to him, I was like, look, I'm going to tell you this, as a guy that's got a garage full of bikes, it
yeah,
doesn't matter how many bikes you have. It's never going to be like, there's always this other one that has something else interesting to you.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. There's the age old, if you could have one bike question, what would it be? And I think that be no, thank you. Don't answer. Don't
yeah,
make me answer that question.
yeah, yeah. It's tough. It really is. I think yeah, it's really tough, especially I think when you're not a cyclist and you're um, looking at people that are cyclists, and somebody would walk into my garage and be like, "This makes
Yeah,
zero sense.
yeah,
Why you have this many bikes?" But like when you really get into it, you start to notice like this is a different tool for this job.
yeah, yeah.
Like if you go to the hardware store, there's like freaking 10 different hammers. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
me as a guy that wants to bang on a nail, like I'm like, I don't see the difference. I just want to
yeah,
bang on a nail, you
yeah,
know. But when you start riding more, it's like, no, definitely makes this experience in particular way more fun or way more whatever it is that you're looking for. And yeah, it's I would have been able to answer that question, like what bike would I choose 10, 15 years ago, a lot easier than I can now, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that might whittle down, if I wasn't in the bike industry and uh, budgetary constraints were different. It might be 3 or 4 bikes, but it'd still be 3 or 4 bikes, and there'd probably be others and parts behind that. Those are just
Yeah.
primary ones annually that I ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, it's interesting. And then, the things are always changing as well. And it's like, on one hand, you feel like a little bit overwhelmed at times where you're like, oh man, now this new thing's coming out and all these bikes I have, now I want that. Like, let's just take the transmission, for example, the new, you know, way to mount your derailleur to your bikes or whatever, then you start being like, well, I really like the way this transmission works, and my hardtail, let's just say, doesn't have that anymore.
Yeah.
It gets overwhelming in that aspect, but on the other hand, it's also really fun to like
Yeah.
have the new innovations.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. It's I kind of find it's kind of pro cons or inverse of one another where I'm riding a notch with transmission and all this technology and drive system. Recently, I had the opportunity to get on flight attendant, and I love all that stuff. And on the other hand, yesterday I went for a ride on my trail bike, which is quote unquote completely analog with a mechanical dropper and mechanical shift and all these things. And
Yeah.
I both want all the things as well as other times don't want to deal with any of the things.
Yeah.
So it changes.
Yeah. It's pretty flat around here. And for a while, I rode a single speed to work. It's like, 15, 16 miles each way. And, that thing was really nice to not really have to be worried about anything on it. It's just like, are my brake pads worn out? Nope. Like that's going to take like 3 years,
lubed or not.
Yeah, exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, that aspect is really nice to not have to think about anything at all. Where do you see, you guys as a company looking at the potential of like gearboxes changing things, or do you think that the derailleur is really there to stay?
Yeah, when I started in the industry in the early 2000s, there was the Honda project going on with Greg Minar. There was a company out of Germany working on a geared box. I think Hayes had one kind of in the works. So there are these examples, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. And I was like, man, if they can bring that internal, of course, then the big challenge was we only put out so much power, and those are wildly inefficient compared to the drivetrain as we know it today. And I think whether it be, example like our Tributary, where we've really kind of made it into this drop bar 29er, but the motor makes that bike so capable and possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see more of that, to be honest with you, particularly with e-bike, where things that we've dismissed in the past are now all of a sudden capable again, because we have, somewhere in the range of 300 to 400 additional watts of continuous power coming out of that drive system.
Yeah, I think the e-bikes are definitely the part where it makes it way more or way less like weird to think about. Let's just say it that way.
Yeah.
The only part that makes me nervous about it is like that just takes it one step closer for the non-cyclists to be like, that's a motorcycle.
Yeah. I mean, I think the class system helps, and but I think there is that perspective of, yep, it does have a motor in it, and I'm not here to dispute, is it a motorized bike or is it a motorcycle?
Yeah.
It does have a motor. That does mean that there's going to be trails that it's not possible to ride it on.
Yeah.
And we can try to change some of those laws where it's applicable. And then, frankly, there's other areas where it probably doesn't belong. And
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
you know, and
I think it's an interesting time that we're
yeah,
in. You know, somebody older that's not a cyclist was talking to me the other day, and they were talking about how, from their perspective, that they saw e-bikes becoming more popular because the price of automobiles are just going, like, especially when states like California are making it where, like, they're going to say you have to buy like an electric car, right? And then
yeah,
these electric cars are, instead of $20,000, are $50,000 to $100,000.
yep,
The person was like, I think that these electric bikes, you're going to see more and more of them, where it's like somebody might have had a car before, but now they're like, get a grocery getter type of commuter e-bike to go to the grocery store with and do their errands, and they're like, I can get this for a couple grand, you know?
yeah. And there may be sort of economic reasons that drive people into it, and there may be health and wellness reasons, you know,
Yeah,
as well, or something of that nature. And I think again, however someone comes into it, I'm happy for them, you know, and I think they'll find the benefits in both perspectives.
yeah,
I will say we were talking about the drop bars perspective on a gravel bike earlier, and prior to working here in my basement, um, full time, I commuted to our office, and that was 15, 16 miles away. And you know, the weather, particularly in the winter, could be a barrier at times.
yeah,
I would typically ride at least one way, but fortunately, I had colleagues that lived in my neighborhood, and I would catch a ride back with them, maybe in the afternoon. But you know, with an e-bike, it's like that removes another barrier to getting out the door. Um,
yeah,
and whether that's short trips or long trips like that, uh, you know, just removing that barrier, making it one step easier. And then I think for a lot of people, they remove that barrier and they find like, oh, I had all these ideas about what this was, and if I make it a part of my routine, it's possible.
yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I did a, you know, similar mileage commute for a long time, and winter was definitely the time when it definitely became way easier to
Yeah.
talk myself into taking the car. You know, it's like, and it's raining. Nah, not today. You know?
And, you know, ours are cold and snowy typically, not this
Yeah,
past. I'll tell you what I would say. I say this all the time. Like I would rather have 20 in snow than 35, 40 in rain. And
yeah,
you know, that totally changes the perspective as well. That 35
yeah,
in rain is harsh conditions.
yeah. It's also interesting how much warmer you have to dress when you're moving faster than like mountain biking. You know?
Yeah, I find I have to wear, you know, typically in the winter I'm wearing two layers. One of them might be a windproof front, but on the e-bike, it's required. Got to wear three layers, and it's not necessarily an output component. It's really about that wind shear. You know,
Yeah,
traveling at somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 miles an hour faster, and getting hit with the wind is it's quite cold for sure.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's real. It's like, you know, I didn't actually think about that in terms of e-bike, because I don't currently have one, but I can imagine. I'm supposed to be getting one here soon, and that's actually something I didn't really think about. You know, I know my temperatures and like types of riding. You know, like if I'm going out on my gravel bike, I will not dress the same way. Like on a mountain bike, I could be like, it could be 45 degrees and I
Yep.
could still be wearing shorts with knee
Yeah.
pads
Yeah.
and and maybe a light jacket, you know, depending. Like I might even, like, if it's 50, I could still wear a t-shirt and still be
Yeah.
fine, you know.
Absolutely.
But you're moving slow enough that like you don't get that wind, and maybe it is on that downhill section, but you're so overheated from the
Yeah.
climb that it doesn't matter, you know.
Flip it and climb right away. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yep.
if you're like in that same state, but on an e-bike now, where all of a sudden you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's
To,
interesting to
to
really think about.
highlight how much wind is a factor, I will not wear on a gravel e-bike a helmet with a visor because
Oh,
I literally feel my head getting pulled backwards by the wind catch on the front of that bike.
oh yeah.
It's kind of wild. So I'm making sure I'm always wearing a road helmet on a class
Nice.
3 e-bike because it's something. And you know, if I was doing that 15, 16 mile commute out to our office daily, I'd definitely be on a drop bar bike because
Yeah.
I'm just not sitting up in the wind. Um,
Yeah.
as I am with a flat bar.
Yeah.
Speed. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, it is. That's definitely a trip.
We're, all this to highlight, like we are just at the front end of understanding how these things are going to impact our world.
Yeah. Are you seeing things kind of stabilize and get a little bit closer to normal coming out of the whole pandemic situation? Or do you think that the bike industry has another year or two of being a little rocky? Or
I think we've got at least another calendar year of being rocky. I think the extent in aggregate to which the industry had built up inventory is only now being known. That said, I think we're starting to see, somewhat of a light at the end of the tunnel. But I think what's being masked is how much the industry and consumer purchasing behaviors have changed over that time. We're so focused on the inventory challenges that we all well know and that we've read about, and that it might be masking, how do people want to buy product? Where do they want to buy product? What kind of product do they want? Um, how much of that sales did we pull forward with this deep discounting? And or what are people going to be willing to spend when we're not discounting bikes, 30, 40% off all the time? And so it's still going to be rocky ahead. There's this, sort of ripple effect that all this has.
yeah, it's one of those things where people get accustomed to the sales and then they expect that forever. I was talking to a company that does, more like clothing and stuff like that, and they were talking about you can't actually have something that's not on sale or doesn't have some coupon code or something like that anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the point? Like, why can't we just change it to those prices and then not have a sale? But if you don't, then people are like, nope, not going to do it.
There's got to be incentive, and I think there's somewhat of a sticker shock, coming out of the pandemic, prior to pandemic. And I mean, take it out of the bike example. Going out to eat is more expensive now, and you got to keep an eye out for surcharges as well as tipping, on your bill. And but for good reason. People need to make a living wage and deserve to make a living wage. And in cycling, it's a little different right now. It's not necessarily about the wage component. Keeping a business running is of course important, but it's really about the inventory and holy cow, the carrying cost of uh, thousands of bicycles is quite expensive. So we've got to clean out of that inventory, keep the business moving.
So I noticed on your site you guys are selling direct to consumer, but I know that you're also in my local bike shop as well. Is there, like, do you guys feel like that's good to have both options? Or I mean, obviously you do, but is there a preference to the way that you see it going or anything like that?
So Q's bike brands don't actually transact directly with the rider today. So um, we transact through the retailers.
Oh,
And
okay, so the prices are just on the website there. As
yeah,
far
so
as
the prices are on the website, but we really send the rider to retail.
Okay.
If you search, for any one of our bikes, you're gonna, get those Google responses just like you would anywhere, and they're gonna send you to, maybe a local retailer in your region who has purchased that SEO, or a national retailer. And so, in my region, we have our local shop, Angry Catfish or Freewheel, as well as REI,
Mm-hmm.
their product nationally online. And that was a big change for QBP. There's a lot of debate, like, oh, should we allow retailers to ship directly to rider? But that's one of the ways in which purchasing behaviors did change, in large part because they had to change, because
Mm-hmm.
riders couldn't go into retail, so bike shops could stay open because they were essential. Yet, not every retailer was allowing people in the front door,
Yeah.
so to speak. And so that's been a big change for us. But now we have retail shipping directly to riders, and there's never been better access to our product. At least
Do you guys prefer that people have that that how do I say this? Like, is that being driven because of your relationship with the shops, or is that being driven because like the way that you want your product to be like sold to your consumers, or like is there potential that you see like all the bike companies are eventually going to be like direct to consumer as well?
I mean, I think the market will decide, and I think you know, more than all the bike companies will be direct consumer. I think riders will be able to purchase product wherever and however they so choose, right?
Yeah,
And so we probably both own, say, Apple products, and Apple products are available everywhere. You know, we
right.
on Amazon, at Target, at Walmart, on Apple's site, at a
Yeah,
local retailer. You know, they're available ubiquitously, and I think that's really the direction that we're headed. Um, that said, I think particularly for a product like a bicycle that needs service, uh, as a rider, you know, it's possible, but probably unlikely that you're going to know how to service brakes, suspension, wheels, drivetrain,
yeah,
everything. And building a relationship with a retailer who's going to take care of you from a service perspective is going to be probably of a value to most riders, regardless of the type of product they purchase.
yeah.
So
There's. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, so
Yeah,
we really encourage that uh, at a fundamental level. Retailers provide tremendous value to rider, not just on the
yeah,
service component, the sales component, but the community component. You know, to other
yeah.
parts of the conversation as well.
Yeah, there's a lot that I can do on my bike, and there's obviously, I mean, I think potentially there's nothing that I'm not like capable of not learning how to do. But there's certain things where I'm just like, I don't want to deal with this, and that's like better for me to like build that relationship with my local shop for those things,
You bet.
and like yeah, I don't buy every single thing from them just because I'm like, you know, there's a huge price difference sometimes of what
Absolutely.
I can get something online from compared to them. But I think it's very important to have that relationship with your local shop, because I do have some friends that don't go to a shop at all. And when they have certain circumstances where they need things like quickly or like whatever, they don't have that relationship that they can walk in and that shop like knows you and they're like, yeah, normally if you just walk in the door, we're going to tell you it's 2 weeks for us to fix that. But since you come in here all the time, we can like make it
Yep.
work for you. You,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Your extends beyond customer to client relationship.
yeah,
Taking
and I
care.
think at those times, like it's more valuable than the money that you could
Yeah.
save by like always doing it yourself.
Yeah. I am incredibly privileged to have the talent we have at QVP in our service. You know, and we have wheel builders. We have folks who are experts in suspension, and you know, to be able to take those products into our technicians at Q and have them build a set of wheels or rebuild a suspension or a dropper, uh, I rely on that quite a lot. And if I was a rider, particularly in spaces where suspension, I would be looking to build that relationship with a retailer and get the best performance out of those products, as well as the longest service life out of them.
Yeah.
Making sure they're annually checked over and rebuilt.
Yeah. I had this argument with a friend recently about wheel builders, and you know, he was building his own wheel, and I'm like, dude, I would take it in and get it built by somebody that's like does it all the time.
Yeah,
And he's like, dude, you just measure the tension and you got to make sure it's laced right. And I'm like, it's more to it than that though. It's
yeah,
like, you know, and I didn't think about it as we were talking, but it was like later I came up with a bunch of like really good kind of you know, anecdotes to explain it. But I think there's things like that where that yes, in logically it you should be able to do it just fine, like that or suspension or something. But somebody that does it all the time, it's going to be better, you know.
it's a craft, and
Yeah,
the ins and the outs. You know, from a wheels perspective, you know, where the spoke threads prepped right. Did you detune the wheel and set everything in place before you fully brought up the tension? did you over tension it so that when you put the tire on and inflate it and it brings the wheel tension down, it's actually at the right tension still. There's so many different tips and tricks.
Yeah.
Uh, Beyond just selection of the parts.
Yeah.
So,
and it's like, how do you ride? Okay, like a guy that's building your wheel is like, oh, well, you should probably lace these this way because it's going to give you that kind of support or something. And it's just yeah, it was one of those things where I didn't have enough knowledge to really make my argument, but I know what I'm saying is right. You know what I mean?
all this to say that a retailer, whether it's sales or service, they have a good retailers have a strong understanding of what's going on in the industry, what products are performing, and how to service those products, keep them best possible.
Yeah, definitely. Were you guys concerned at all whenever you were making like arrangements with a national retailer that you would really kind of like mess up your maybe relationships with the smaller retailers?
It certainly has an impact, right? I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh no, our single store retailers love this.
Right. Yeah.
It's mixed. Some look at it and go, if you're going to open their store up in my location, no, thank you. Others look at it and go, I see it as an opportunity. They're not going to carry your whole line. They're not going to be as knowledgeable as my staff.
Yeah.
And so I see it as an opportunity to really be the best, retailer in this region. And you having it in a national retailer is going to bring better visibility to the brand on a whole.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that'll walk into an REI to get and buy a bike, but might not have ever bought that bike because they wouldn't have went to a bike shop.
That's precisely the case, and REI is incredibly data driven, and that's one of the things we learned early on in that relationship is that the REI customer is not necessarily the IBD single store bicycle customer. They're an outdoors person, not necessarily a cyclist.
Yeah.
And I suspect from our conversation, you and I, maybe we shop at REI for outdoor equipment, but we walk right through the bike section.
Yeah. I'll walk into the bike section just to see what they have. And it's usually like, nope, don't want to do that. Or like those, like I've gone there in a pinch looking for a tire, and it's like, this is the most popular mountain bike tire. How do they not have this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I think they serve audience that largely the bicycle retailer doesn't often serve.
Yeah,
whether that be because of how that person identifies, or maybe how intimidating the single store retailer experience can be.
Yeah,
for someone who's not a cyclist. I don't know about you, but I probably wouldn't walk into a golf pro shop.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, zero need to be in there.
Quite intimidated. I feel out of place in our local run shop, even though they do do a great job of keeping people welcome when they come in the door. So, yeah, REI it's been a good relationship for us, and really appreciate what they've done for the brand and how they support. But at the same token, so too have the hundreds of other retailers who might have 1, 2, or more stores. To a core audience that REI doesn't necessarily reach.
Right. I wanted to ask you about the flight attendant. You said you tried it out earlier. I haven't been on one of those. So talk to me about it. How'd that go? What was that like?
Yeah, so we're testing a flight attendant in SID configuration.
Let's take a step back. Can you explain what flight attendant is, just in case there's some people listening that don't know what it is?
You bet. Oh man, the folks from SRAM are gonna call me and be like, "You totally that."
Well, when they call you, tell them that I would like to have them on the show, and then we can just talk.
Yeah, if you're watching or listening, go check out SRAM's much more informative videos that I'm about to share detail on. There's tons of great YouTube on it, but what flight attendant is an electronic control of really the compression of the fork and rear shock on the bicycle, and it uses sampling of power or location of the cranks to determine that. And really, the premise of it is that it's going to adjust your compression setting. Maybe that's your fully open or fully closed or your pedal position much more effectively than you or I might, because it samples at a significantly higher rate and reacts
Right.
more quickly than you and I will. And so I've had the opportunity to ride it in a Lyric Super Deluxe trail setting with SRAM, and I've had the opportunity now to ride it in an XC setting here over the last few weeks, and it's awesome to say the least. I'm so impressed with it, and I am a rider who primarily rides my suspension wide open
Mm-hmm.
100% of the time, and I wouldn't say that's out of laziness. It's more just out of pragmatism of how I ride, where I ride, but riding our spearfish with it and having it shift into a fully firm setting when I'm pedaling the pavement to the trail, or when I pitch up a climb, having it move into a pedal position, which just keeps the bike from bobbing a little bit on that climb. And then frankly, like hearing it open up when I unweight the front of that wheel going over the front of a drop, it's kind of incredible to hear
So
that.
it's like that was like the first thing that comes to my mind is like, how does it know when you go like from firm climbing something to like, oh, I'm doing this drop, or something
Yeah.
like.
No, when that front wheel is unweighted, and you can hear it in succession. When the front wheel is unweighted, as soon as it's unweighted, it opens the compression all the way open because it knows there's about to be a deep travel event. And
Right.
hear it in the front shock and then the rear shock as it works.
So crazy.
It's kind of wild, and it's pretty pronounced. It sounds much like a shift on this drivetrain as it does that, and it's pretty impressive in that way. And so I've been having the opportunity just to ride it in trail setting, and then I did a race with it as well, and just really enjoyed the experience with it. It felt very natural. It never felt harsh. It never felt like it reacted too slowly, or that it was in the wrong setting when I wanted it to be somewhere. And I just left it in the most neutral of settings for us.
Does that stuff work all wirelessly like the Axis stuff does, or is it like wires
Well,
going between your fork and your rear shock? Or
yeah, all wirelessly, all Bluetooth connected, all accessible through the app. Um, and so now, instead of maybe two batteries on the bike for dropper and rear derailleur or transmission, there's four batteries on the bicycle, plus coin cell batteries that control everything.
yeah, those coin cell ones are the ones that really catch you off guard,
Yeah.
man.
Yep. Yeah.
Holy shit! I had a shifter. Like I go through bikes pretty quickly, so it's like, oh, I rode that bike for a year and then I sold it, and because I've done that so many times, I never changed a battery in an Axis shifter.
Yep.
And one day I had one die, and fortunately I was at the trailhead still. Like I like got on my bike and shifted like a couple of gears, and then it stopped shifting, and I was like, what the hell's going on? And I was like so grateful that like that didn't happen on the trail, because on the trail, like 10 miles from my car, that would have really sucked. In the trailhead, at least I could go to Rite Aid and grab a battery, but it was definitely like one of those things where I was like, I thought these things just lasted forever.
Yep. I had exactly that happen on a dropper nonetheless. And I was on the backside of a trail system, but I knew there was a store near the backside of that trail system. So I just rode off the backside of the trail, got a new battery, came back into the trail, and completed my ride.
Yeah,
but
there's definitely
the ride without that dropper.
Yeah, I feel like I need to add to my little like emergency kit, which is right now is just like a tube and some tire levers. I'm like, I really should add one of those batteries in there. And I don't know, I usually don't carry an Axis battery, an extra one. I usually just like make it a habit of checking beforehand.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I stopped even checking, because my Garmin has always telling me like, hey, your battery's low.
Where it's at. Yeah.
And I don't know what happened, but my Garmin apparently just decided it didn't want to tell me anymore. And the other day it like died mid-ride, and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I should probably put that battery in there. I just don't, I don't want to carry all that crap anymore, you know?
Yeah, I don't think about it often, but I do periodically carry one if I haven't checked it in a while. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna grab an extra one of those and throw it in my bag just in case. And
Yeah.
I do have a coin cell somewhere in that bag that I could dig out. Make sure you put it in a little plastic bag or keep it in the plastic bubble packaging it comes in to protect it.
Yeah.
Works out pretty well.
I'm definitely gonna have to add one of those because because I ride so much. I in my mind, when I used to not ride as much, it'd be like, yeah, you ride this bike like maybe once or twice a week, so that battery is gonna last like 2 years or something.
Yep. Yeah.
But whenever you're riding one bike like 4 times a week or 5 times a week, then it's like, oh yeah, no wonder it died in like 6 months or a year. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, with flight attendant, coming back to it, the fortunate thing is if you do have a battery die, it defaults to the open position, so you're no worse off than you were previously.
Yeah.
So you still have full use of your suspension in it.
Yeah.
And then I feel like I just scratched the surface of it. I think I didn't have a power meter on the bike, which gives you access to what they call advanced dynamics, which looks at your power modes and adjusts suspension based on where you're at in your power. And then I just got it connected to the app and having visibility of what modes you were in during your ride and having some of those pieces of feedback, not unlike we get in Strava or Garmin Connect or otherwise. Super powerful to see that. And, not necessarily analyze the ride, but at least just have a baseline understanding of it.
I used to not really care about power and cadence and stuff like that. And somewhere along the line, I got into Zwift and actually seeing like how much power you're putting out. I now have power meters on all my bikes, and I really that data is actually the one piece of data that I think I look at and actually use while I'm riding, compared to like, and I've had Garmin or something similar forever. Like I always like, hey, you got the speed, the distance or whatever, but like would I ever really look down? And other than maybe the speed on my road bike, it'd be like, oh, okay, I'm clocking 18 right now. I know I want to be at like a 20, or something like that. But that power meter, it just really helps me in so many ways where I feel like I'm being gassed and I can look down and I'm like, no, I know I can maintain 300 watts for X amount of minutes. So like, shut up, brain, and it like really helps me.
Yeah, I think that's very much the case. We see that obviously in road racing and gravel and XC playing a role. I have to imagine that enduro racers are using the same thing and really pushing their runs and understanding that and analyzing it. I wouldn't be surprised if downhill racers are doing the same thing after. I think all this coming back to like the premise of this, the e-bike space, there's so much data being captured by that e-bike motor. And as of yet, so little of it is provided back to us in terms of the gamification that Zwift brought around.
Yeah.
It's coming. I really enjoy being able to see, what was my cadence, what was my power versus what the motor was putting out. What was that average speed, along with all the data that Garmin, captures.
Yeah, you think that they would be working with Garmin or Zwift or not Zwift or like Strava or whatever to really kind of like link that data together, because I mean, it's a lot of useful information in there for somebody to look at.
It's coming. And, back to the training component of this, like, the whole idea that e-bikes are cheating. Well, no, I mean, might be going out and having the same sort of effort score for a ride, but riding for longer or riding at higher speeds or higher intensity for a ride. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that, it's kind of like riding a trainer. Just because you're on a trainer doesn't mean maybe you actually got a more controlled effort on the trainer than you did riding outdoors, because you didn't have to contend with wind and traffic and, trail or whatever the case is. And so I think that same thing is coming with e-bike in a big way from a maturation and game perspective.
Do you think that flight attendant, I mean, obviously that technology is going to trickle down and it's going to get cheaper and stuff like that. You think that's the way it goes? Like every bike's going to have it?
Will every bike have it? I think we're a long way off from every bike having it. I think we still see a lot of riders who prefer, or from a budgetary perspective, around mechanical drivetrains. But I certainly think there does come a point when at a race scenario on the pro level, it's the make or break. It's that marginal gain that's allowing a rider, back to our hardtail discussion, to put that much more power down through the pedals in a sprint or on a climb or on a series of climbs as they're racing. So
I was watching a thing with Armstrong the other day, and they were saying that the difference between the winner of the Tour de France and the guy that's like coming in last is like 2%.
Yeah, that much narrower, right?
Yeah. So like this small advantage like that in a bike could really make a huge difference.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. What are you excited about over at Salsa?
What am I excited about? Well, we had a pretty big launch year. This year we launched, all the aluminum e-bikes, and you can imagine what comes on the heel of a launch of aluminum e-bikes.
Right.
Imagine our line. So I'm pretty excited about those. I'm riding a lot of those future products now for us, and along with the rest of the team. And 25 is going to be a big launch year, both in motorized and non-motorized bikes.
Yeah.
We got some pretty special products coming that I think will continue to kind of wow industry and be very much on brand for us.
So that'd be something like Sea Otter, or do you guys do a launch different time of the year? Or?
I think you'll see us launch products. We don't have a launch calendar defined at this date, but it's probably going to be between the turn of the year, January 1 on through Sea Otter, based on our delivery schedules for bikes. It'll be a big launch season for us.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. A lot in the process right now. We're the team's working on getting everything into production right now. That's our big push.
Yeah.
And I'd say the other thing for me I'm excited is, we talked about the industry and the state of the industry. Fortunate enough to work for a company at QBP that takes a long view on these things, and what we're really looking towards is building back a healthy, stable business that works for rider, retailer, and of course our business. And it's really kind of a circular relationship. And so stabilizing the business and planning forward. And, I've got a roadmap for Salsa for product that's looking out through, at this point in time, 30, and imagine what that future might be and what technologies will be influencing, and what, products we'll be building on that timeline. So I love that work. I love that.
Yeah.
I'll look forward and the ability to help shape the future based on insights that we have today.
Yeah, that's rad, man. That's exciting. I'm super stoked to see what you guys have coming out next year, and I'm sure everybody else is as well. I really appreciate you hanging out and chatting bikes with me for the last couple hours, and everybody that has been listening. If you haven't been over to Salsa's site, check them out, salsacycles.com. I like to ask people before they leave what YouTube video channels they like to watch, whether it has to do with cycling or not, just because this is on YouTube as well. And I think there's some gems out there. So what do you like watching on YouTube?
YouTube. So I'm a big fan of the Tiny Desk concerts, the NPR Tiny Desk.
Oh yeah.
Those are a lot of fun. Those are probably my non-cycling ones most often watched.
Right on.
Cycling wise, let's see what I do watch the EMBN channel. A little bit of that's personal. A little bit of that is professional, of course.
Yeah.
Lone Wolf's doing a great job with some of their bike reviews. They just reviewed our Salsa Notch. That's a great one.
Yeah. They just did the whole EMTB shootout or something like that.
They did, and I think they do a really nice job. And then of course, the Pink Bike podcasts, and I oftentimes am more of a listener than a watcher of those, but
Yeah.
really interesting to hear kind of breakdown of the races and what's
Yeah.
going in that scene.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, like I said, thanks again for coming and hanging out, and all you guys that are listening. If you're on YouTube and you haven't hit the thumbs up or the subscribe button, that would be rad. It always makes me feel good. And I wanted to say thanks to anybody that's written a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast. I was over there yesterday, and I saw there was a new one pop up, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. It means a lot whenever I go over there and see what you guys' opinion are, and especially when your opinion's good. So that's great. If you're thinking like 3 stars, probably not worth your time. You should write somebody else's review. Anyways, I thank everybody for being here and for all the support. And thanks again, Joe, for hanging out and chatting with me. Everybody out there, if you want something for free, check this out. It only takes a bike to be a biker. Get out and be one.
Truth.